Welcome to the Humans of Hospitality podcast with me, Mark Cribb, and a little bit of a different episode this week in the fact that the roles are going to be reversed, and rather than doing the interview myself, I am going to be interviewed. Recently, I was asked to come on a friend of mine who also happens to be my accountant, so a very knowledgeable chap, Warren Munson, who has his own podcast called Evolve to Succeed. And I was fortunate enough to be a guest on his episode, chatting all about the impact of the pandemic and the coronavirus on my personal business and my personal journey. And a number of you have been in touch either through my Twitter or sort of Facebook and social channels asking about how my personal experience and personal business is going. So I asked Warren if, rather than just coming on here and telling you all about it, if I could just share the story that he recorded with me. So I hope you enjoy it. Hopefully it's not too self-indulgent. It's very much around the same issues I've been chatting with other guests with, whether that be the loans from the government, whether that be the retention scheme, coming out on the other side of this, just some general insights and thoughts, and really, that transition period of support that we might need, my general hopes for smaller businesses when we come out the other side, the speed of decision making that's been going on behind the scenes, and all sorts of stuff just around here. How are we all coping in this current fast-paced, fast-changing situation? So I've left the intro to Warren's podcast on here so you can hear all about what he records and why he does it, which I hope you enjoy. Please do check out his website, show him some support, and remember, if you can, do go to the humansofhospitality.co.uk website and click on the Patreon link right at the top of the first page and make a donation to support this podcast. That would be hugely appreciated.
The Evolve to Succeed podcast, where founders, entrepreneurs, business leaders and experts are interviewed to explore the link between personal and business success. We will also investigate and establish the need for ongoing personal development, accountability and support. The objective is to inspire you, the audience, to be better in life and in business. Welcome to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. As part of Evolve's ongoing insight and discussions into COVID-19 over the next few weeks, I'm going to be chatting to previous guests and other business leaders, hearing their stories about how they've been affected by the current situation and how they are dealing with it. It's clearly a difficult time for us all, and my aim with these podcasts is not only to inform you about what businesses are going through, but also the measures they're practically taking to minimise the damage caused by COVID-19. I hope to also inspire you and add something practical and positive to your outlook over the coming weeks. My guest today is Mark Cribb of Urban Guild. Mark was my first ever guest on the Evolve to Succeed podcast. When we spoke to him in that original episode, he had just opened a new restaurant in Bournemouth Gardens and had plans in place to have it flourishing by the summer. However, roll on 9 months and 48 hours before Mother's Day, his business was severely scuppered by the implications of the COVID-19 lockdown. Like others in the hospitality industry, Mark has been hit practically hard by COVID-19, but as is his nature, he's trying to remain calm, practical and positive throughout this crisis. During the discussion, Mark gives his insights and thoughts on ongoing government support once things have started to settle down.
I hope the government are sort of looking into what's the ongoing support here? How's this package going to continue? Because it seems silly, hospitality is the third largest employer in the country. We employ over 3 million people. Having saved them, we need to start thinking about, right, when we come out the other end of this, what's the length of time that we can continue to support? Because those businesses aren't going to need all of those people instantaneously. We'll want to try and bring them in gradually, I suspect.
He reveals his hopes for smaller businesses once the crisis is over.
A lot of people can't get into the supermarkets and they want to maintain physical distance. But, the butcher and the baker and the greengrocers, they've never been busier. And I think a lot of people have started to use those shops and those trades, didn't really know they were there. And I really, really do sort of hope that they remember them once life goes back to normal.
And talks about how the current situation really brings the entrepreneur mindset to the fore.
the business decisions, the speed that we were making decisions, the debts we were cancelling, the negotiations now with lawyers and solicitors and and everybody behind the scenes. That's kind of what I'm good at, I suppose, and it hasn't been overly challenging. I've probably quite enjoyed. I keep saying to people, I'm not bored. I'm absolutely buzzing.
Let's get on with the show. Welcome, Mark Cribb, back to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thank you for having me, Warren. Pleasure to be back.
Yeah, it was great to have you back. You were our first ever guest on the Evolve to Succeed podcast. Clearly, life has moved on from there, particularly with what's going on in the world with COVID-19. So really keen to get both an update on your story and also just to discuss the effect that COVID-19 is having on your business, but also with your Humans of Hospitality podcast hat on, a kind of insight into the hospitality sector in general at the moment and what's going on. So could we kick off really with where we left it? Was you were on the podcast, we recorded it just before last summer. You were about to open Urban Gardens in central Bournemouth. So do you want to bring us up to speed with things from there, really?
Yeah, really? Is that when it was? Yeah. Okay, so we did open Urban Garden, which was great. Really good feedback, actually. Lovely venue, right in the town centre. Typical me, it's got a massive amount of outside space, so it works really well on a sunny day and less well on a rainy day. So it's another sort of fair weather venue. But yeah, it was busy, and we opened in June, so we really only got 2 months, July and August, to give the business a proper test. Then we went into winter, which was probably quieter than we were expecting, apart from Christmas. Had a really good Christmas. Jan and Feb were quiet, but it was really going to be all about this summer. All of our venues really are seasonal town, big terraces. So we were getting geared up for summer. We were, 48 hours away from Mother's Day. The forecast was good. We had a couple of hundred people booked in across the group. We'd recruited a team ready for spring. So we were all good to go, hoping that we were going to have one of the best summers we've ever had with our sort of, 2 of our new venues and the hotel still trading. And then COVID happened and they are all closed, Warren.
Crumbs. Well, yeah, devastating, Mark, to learn that. And obviously had seen some of the media and PR and everything that's been around, particularly you and the industry. I mean, how did you ever cope with that moment of getting through the hard times, getting through the winter, and as you say, just about to open, blue skies forecast, and there was that moment when you realise that you can do nothing else but follow the government orders and close your venues?
Yeah, it was a shock, and we sort of saw it unfolding in slow motion, I suppose, because we'd seen what was happening over in China, and at first there was no real recognition. There was, sort of it may get out of China, but nobody was really talking about it in any major way. And then I think when it got into Italy, we really started to get a little bit nervous, and I was probably, a couple of weeks ahead of my team, and I remember recording a little video, because I do some video comms to them sometimes, because it's the easiest way to update over multiple venues. But I sent it to a couple of my senior guys and just said, I was going to send this to the team about what I think's about to happen. And they came back and they said, you can't send that. They'll literally panic, because I put there that, their next payday might be their last for a while and they should really batten down the hatches. And the team made me re-record it and be a little bit softer. And then sure enough, I think it was a few days after that New York started to close restaurants. And by then I was convinced, once Italy and New York were on the same trajectory, it just became a matter of time. And we were watching the daily briefings. I think it was the Tuesday of that week where Boris, in essence, told people not to visit restaurants. He didn't tell us to close, but he told customers not to visit. That was really confusing. And it was really difficult morally to think, are we making the situation worse here by staying open, or does he want us to stay open? And he just wants vulnerable people not to attend. So we geared up, as I said, for that sort of Mother's Day weekend, and then it was the Friday when they actually came out and explicitly said, right, we're going to close you down. And actually, at that point, it was easier that at least we weren't having to go through the sort of moral debate. Albeit takeaways were told they could stay open. So we kept that open for the weekend, but it was the first sunny weekend we'd had for a long time. And it showed, how much the business was about to reignite itself and kind of, roll into summer, because we were really busy, and had a bit of flack from people for sort of having queues outside. So the Sunday, we went in and we drew sort of lines on the pavement, keeping people apart, and we really tried to enforce social distancing. And then I think it was the Sunday night, or it might have been the Monday night actually, that then, it was the Monday, we traded Monday, and Monday night Boris came out and he was like, right, it's full lockdown. And it was at that point when we said, you know what, let's not even keep the takeaway open. Let's wait. Public opinion will probably change at some point where they'll be desperate for us to open. But for now, let's do the right thing. Let's close down. Let's encourage people to stay at home. And there's been a lot of people advising that we should get into delivery. And I know a lot of restaurants have flipped into delivery. But at the minute, we decided, let's just batten down the hatches and see where we go from here.
And it is really difficult, isn't it? We've got clients and people I know that run businesses currently that are manufacturing or construction. And again, they're struggling with that moral dilemma. Do they open? Do they close? Because they are still in that stage you were, in that void period between some advice, but perhaps not the clarity. And that must have felt very strange, as you say, because you've run your business with doing the right thing as nearly a underlying motto, and looking after people, and not knowing what to do must have felt very strange and awkward, Mark.
Yeah, I've always been sort of able to look people in the eye and say that we make the right decisions, and most of those decisions are around, what we source product-wise. So, we're very much into following the seasons. We're definitely into the ethics of the suppliers that we work with, where we catch our fish from. And these things can be complicated because fish move around the world, and you can't be a completely seasonal restaurant and sell wine from New Zealand and, coffee from, sort of down by the equator. But with all of them, we've been able to look people in the eye, and we've been able to justify a decision and say, look, we made this decision, we were informed, and this is what we sell and why. But that was the first time that I'd ever been in a situation where the national government was telling people not to visit my venue, and here I was trying to work out whether I should still keep it open. And in some ways, you feel a moral obligation to try and keep your team employed. So anybody who's working in construction or manufacturing, I sympathise with them, because they want to keep those people employed. They don't want to rely on government handout and benefit. And in one side, the government are saying, please, keep trade going. And on the other side, it's kind of like, use your common sense and do social distancing. So it's tricky from both perspectives. I get it from the government perspective, but I really sympathise for employers who are having to make that decision, whether they're putting their customers or their teams at risk. So, challenging circumstance.
So obviously, with the clarity of what you could and couldn't do, I assume you were faced then with the laying off, which has since become furloughing your staff.
Yeah, who knew that word a couple of weeks ago? Furloughed, I think, wasn't it? It's apparently common in the US when they do their shutdowns, but I'd love to see the Google statistics for who'd ever looked up the word furlough 2 weeks ago in England, and then how many times it's been researched in the last couple of weeks. But that was a real lifesaver. I'd put out quite an emotional kind of message to my team, because I thought that I'd committed that I would do whatever it took to pay them in full for the month of March, because I thought that would be their last paycheck for as long as I could see, because I think this is going to go on for some time. And I was deeply uncomfortable. Many of those people I'd worked with for over a decade, it's not a particularly well-paid industry. Some of my team had just had kids, and when I don't look at my team and just see numbers. I know all of their stories a little bit, and then obviously their names and their lifestyles and what they do. And the thought that they were just going to be left with no income, not being able to pay their rent, not being able to pay for food, was genuinely the most emotional I've been in the whole thing. So when Rishi announced on that evening the sort of the retention package, where they would furlough and pay up to 80% of my team's wages, up to 2.5k per month, gosh, that was probably the last time that I had a real euphoric rush of happiness. I nearly wept again, and I put up a little Rishi poster on my wall, and I say a little thank you to him before I go to bed each night. Not all of that's true, Warren, but I'd like to.
I know. I think there's a lot of us as business owners and business leaders, that was the sigh of relief that we were all facing tough and difficult choices, but actually we all, you and I are very similar, Mark. We're very passionate about our teams. We wear our heart on our sleeves. We've built a business over 15, 16 years that we're really proud of, but we're really proud of the teams we've built. And therefore, this has given us all an option to tread very carefully and to make the right decisions, but to try and look after our people at the same time, so that we can bring the business back and bring our teams back together in due course. And I think that's really important for us all, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I'm sort of flipping my headspace a little bit from the sort of instantaneous survival, batten down the hatches. What costs can we cut? Great, the team have been retained, and now my headspace is moving a little bit to how long will this support be there? How do we reopen? What time of the year will that be? And realistically, when I reopen the business, it's not going to be the same business that I closed, and we're not going to need the same levels of team. So that I hope the government are sort of looking into what's the ongoing support here? How's this package going to continue? Because it seems silly. Hospitality is the third largest employer in the country. We employ over 3 million people. I mean, it would have been absolutely catastrophic if the industry was forced to close down through no fault of its own. And all of those people, pretty much, I say 95% of them would have ended up being laid off instantaneously. Having saved them, we need to start thinking about, right, when we come out the other end of this, what's the length of time that we can continue to support? Because those businesses aren't going to need all of those people instantaneously. We'll want to try and bring them in gradually, I suspect. But yeah, it's complicated.
I think it is complicated, isn't it? And you do hope that, and I'm sure it is in the government's mind, that there is no point in just temporarily saving jobs and avoiding high unemployment. There's got to be some sort of support, as you say, for certain industries in particular at the back end of this, to give people the support to rebuild, reset their businesses and grow again. Other businesses will be able to take their team straight back in. The volume will be there, and actually some form of normality, whatever normality may be, the other side of this will return. But I can see the challenge that the hospitality sector or the seasonal tourism type sector will have, that you're going to only have a short period of good trading, maybe a 2 to 3 month period before you reach that period where cash flow becomes under challenge, and you won't have had long enough in the summer season to support you through that. That must be
exactly,
a real fear, Mark.
It is, and I'm not comfortable with I'm not the sort of person that expects a government bailout, and I've always just thought you're a decent entrepreneur, decent business owner, you get challenges and you just work them out, and we've worked through recessions, and we've worked through good years and bad years, and we've made wrong decisions before, but we've never there is no strategy that plans for a complete drop in revenue to zero overnight and how you trade back out of that. So although I can't see why should the government treat hospitality any different? I also think that, I've spent 15 years building this business. We've got a good reputation. We are part of the local community. People come in and have birthdays and anniversaries and weddings, and they spend time with us. Hospitality businesses for me are almost the very point of being on planet Earth. So if you're going to support any industry, then I guess, where we have been so decimated through no choice of our own, but we are part of what will pick people back up again. People will want to get back together. They'll want to go and have a glass of wine or a meal with their friends and their family. And if the industry is completely gone through no fault of its own, then I think that's pretty sad for humanity, really. But the flip side is it can't be an open checkbook. So I suppose the economics have always got to make sense as to, those 100 people would be laid off. I pay over £1 million a year in various sort of, taxes to the government. And I've done that for the last 15 years, and I'm happy and want to continue to do that. So we're just going to have some very sort of big picture grown up conversations, and probably some people cleverer than me that sit there and work out how we get out of this mess. Everything we've done so far has been sort of stem the losses. And now it's got to be, right, how do we rebuild? Once, obviously, we've supported the NHS and got through the actual most important thing here, which is people's health and well-being, I guess.
Absolutely. But I think you're right. I think the government approach at the moment is actually, keep society together, keep society intact, and then try and understand how to deal with the longer term consequences once, as you say, the important thing has been dealt with, which is the health crisis has been dealt with, the pressure that is being exerted on the NHS has been dealt with. But yeah, it probably will need minds stronger than both of ours, Mark, to come up with the solution. And I assume what you're seeing is this is now common with your Humans of Hospitality podcast host sort of hat on. I know you're speaking to lots within the industry. They're clearly all feeling the same way. There's nobody in your industry, I assume, that is sort of doing well in this environment or has found their own unique solution?
Not really, no. Maybe the likes of Deliveroo and Uber Eats and some of those players, but I think the ripple effects, it hit the frontline retailers, first, instantaneous, but almost at exactly the same time, we all cancelled our payments to lots of our suppliers. So you've got farmers and fishmongers and spirit makers and winemakers and wholesalers and accountants and lawyers. It flew back up the chain really, really quickly. And I'm speaking to all of those people. Some have managed to pivot. I was chatting to Canton Tea, for example, who are an amazing tea producer. And they, within 24 hours, at the minute, they only supply wholesale and they only supply to the hospitality sector. But within 24 hours, they got a B2C, direct-to-consumer website up online. They created an affiliate scheme where anybody who works in hospitality can recommend their product and people can buy through it. And that gave 20% of the revenue to the hospitality person. So it was a really nice way of trying to give them some sort of income when they no longer had jobs. And then they were also donating £1 for every box sold to Hospitality Action, which is the charity that's been running since 1837, which supports our sector and is providing £250 grants to people in financial difficulty. So there's been all sorts of examples, and the community's kind of really stepped up, and some of the restaurants are making food for the NHS and supplying key workers. Lots of hotels are supplying free bed space for key workers. So the industry's really kind of stepped up and done what it can, but none of it is revenue generating really. And it's just about, keeping a few people employed or keeping ticking over in a small way. But yeah, it's affected the whole sector at an incredible pace.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to see, across all types of businesses and sectors, what some of the sort of small owner-managed entrepreneurial businesses are doing to support, the NHS and those that work in that sector. Right now, we're seeing locally, aren't we? We're seeing Conquer Gin switch to producing sanitizer. I've got a client that's a nursing home that was screaming for sanitizer because couldn't get the supplies, or the supplies that they could get was sort of 10 times its normal price by their normal suppliers. So if that's not exploitation that Boris doesn't want, I don't know what is. But they found a brewery that would make them a sanitizer and couldn't find the bottles. So I was able to put them in touch with Muck-Off, and Muck-Off had provided them with the plastic bottles to put the sanitizer in to solve their problem and their need within that nursing home. But we're seeing stories like that everywhere. And it makes you believe in the human spirit once again, doesn't it, Mark?
Definitely. I think that sort of sense of community. And if something, I do believe a lot of good things will come out at the back of this, although it's really hard to see how this ends from a sort of financial and business perspective. And I think people are trying to change the name now to physical isolation, not social isolation, because in many ways, the sort of, the social connection of the local community is the strongest that I've seen it. And thank goodness we've got the internet in this crisis, because it is connecting people, things like you and I having this conversation now. But yeah, Conquer Gin, they got us out of a hole as well. As soon as they started to deliver that sanitizer, because, we were open, we couldn't get hold of it because everybody went out and panic bought. And they really did rescue us. And now that we're all closed and they can flip it into the NHS, brilliant. We had a load of gloves and masks that we used down in the restaurant that we took down to the hospital because they were struggling to get hold of them. I've never seen, I don't think, such a sense of community, and it's kind of nice to know. I'm a deluded optimist, Warren, and I know you are too, and I always like to think that people are good and people are kind, and that is that underlying sense of society. And if you work in hospitality, we generally only work around people who are out to have a good time and have fun. But it's been reassuring to see people step up. And what is it now? Nearly 1 million volunteers nationally sort of stepping out to help the community. I hope there's some good stuff that comes out of this that we don't forget too quickly and that doesn't change. And particularly around supporting the local guy and the little guy and that community kind of vibe.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. One of the things that I absolutely fascinated to see is how, the human spirit and that sense of kindness is shining through. My fear is that 6-12 months down the line, we all return to some form of normality and perhaps looking after self-interest. And perhaps, my hope is that people can remember this situation and what they did within their communities to serve a better good. as well as
Yeah,
as well as being entrepreneurial, and as well as having that sense of wanting to create wealth for the right reasons, but being socially responsible at the same time. So fingers crossed.
I really hope so. I mean, if just look at my local high street, Southbourne High Street, a lot of people can't get into the supermarkets and they want to maintain physical distance. But the butcher and the baker and the not the candlestick maker, the greengrocers, they've never been busier. And I think a lot of people have started to use those shops and those trades who didn't really know they were there. And I really, really do sort of hope that they remember them once life goes back to normal, and they build those relationships, and they're actually physically going out and buying their bread and buying their groceries each morning. I hope that some of the reason, and it's why I launched the Humans of Hospitality podcast, is that I kept saying I think people make subconscious rather than conscious decisions. If you ask people, do they want local business? Do they want everything to be owned by international chains? Or do they think, that spirit of the local shopkeeper and supporting lots of families and lots of people? Most people would say, oh no, I really like the idea. I don't want the world to only be Amazon and Apple. I want lots of people to have the opportunity to trade. I want there to be a vibrant, entrepreneurial kind of local community. So now that they've been forced into realizing, oh my goodness, my local greengrocer does actually deliver. That local baker does make better bread and he makes it every day. Maybe that now we've established those links, people won't forget, and they will start to just be a little bit more conscious in their decisions. And I think what some of the big brands have done, and some slightly exploitive kind of practices, and even in my sector, when you've seen some of the big players in hospitality who've not used the retention scheme and they've just laid off their staff, I think there's some bad press coming out in the same way there's some good press. And I hope people remember and they go, look, you're a baddie, you didn't treat your team and your company well, you're a goodie and you did, and the goodies will get some support. But as I said, I am eternally optimistic, Warren, but realistic enough to know that people have short memories. So we will see. I'll keep banging on and trying to remind people.
So are you the Batman versus the big corporates being Joker? Are you? Is that what we're saying?
I think that is the case. Yeah, I mean, I've been banging on about this for a long time. It was the motivation for launching the podcast, was to have conversations with the human beings. It's always been the human beings. Even in our business, we don't buy from companies, we don't buy from brands, we buy from people. Dave, who supplies our eggs, and all of the rest of the guys, Rupert down at Conquer, it's always the people first and the brand is second.
No, definitely. So what has been, turning back to Urban Guild and your venues and your kind of customers, what kind of support have you had from the kind of public and your customers?
Incredible, really, the offers of support. When people sort of watched the car crash of the sort of 5 or 6 days that this was evolving over, as quickly as we were coming up with plans and strategies to try and keep trading in some guise, whether it was takeaway or reduced hours or whatever we were trying to do. The government was changing things, and we were making decisions that probably normally in your business life, you'd make less decision in 18 months than we were making in 18 hours. But the public were great at showing an interest, and then just overwhelming. Some of them, we're sort of 2 weeks later now, and I only finally finished all of the emails this morning from all of the people who sent well wishes, and the number of examples we were sent about, I met my partner at your venue and now we're married and we've got a couple of kids, or I came down for my daughter's graduation, or I had an anniversary there. We're part of the fabric of society, and people remember us. They don't remember this, they wouldn't remember where necessarily they went to buy their jeans or where they went to buy a bottle of booze, but we're part of their lives. And it was a really useful reminder, actually, because hospitality's been tough the last couple of years. It's been a really challenging sector. We've seen the likes of Jamie Oliver's and Coluccio's and these sort of big brands going under, and quite often not their fault. It's just particularly challenging environment. But when you get this kind of tsunami of positivity and of feedback from these lovely customers, and you've been part of their lives for over a decade, it was humbling, and it did make me well up quite a lot, and just really nice. The number of people out there who want us to reopen, and they're offering to buy vouchers and pay in advance for parties, or they're buying vouchers and cutting them up and saying they're not going to use them. So really, really lovely amount of support.
Awesome. That's exactly what you want to hear, isn't it? And that gives you that, I assume, that spirit, and that helps to give you that resilience to find your way and find the exit route to all of this hardship, to reopen again, as you say, maybe in some different form or under some different format, but it must just give you that sense of feel good that carries you through these difficult times, Mark.
Definitely, yeah. You almost can't. It's tempting to just, by the enormity of the cash flow challenges of, the fact that 15 years after building a business, we've almost got to reset to sort of financial zero. The impact on the team, it's overwhelming, and there's definitely a bit of you that goes, you know what, maybe. This is just the time to get out and to roll over and go, do I really want to be borrowing money and getting into more debt to rebuild a really challenging business? And it can be a little bit dark sometimes to look at the potential impact of that on, your own headspace, your own finances, your family. But the flip side is absolutely when you see that incredible support and you realise, that we're part of the community. And I'm not running a national chain, we're just a few local bars and restaurants. But when you look at Urban Reef down on the seafront and you can sit on the balcony down there, overlooking the ocean, enjoying an icy cold beer and some quality food with your friends or your family, people love that, and it's a beautiful thing to provide. And I don't think anybody else could provide it better. They might be able to provide it easier than I can, but I think we do a good job. So yes, their support has really motivated me to sort of step up, and in some ways the government support as well. The fact the government didn't just sort of let us all go under and go, well, that's capitalism for you, you'll fold, that's it. They've done so much that you feel this sort of moral obligation as an SME to step up and go, okay, you've done all you can to try and save us, I will now do everything that I can to try and make this business good again.
Yeah. So turning to you personally, Mark, and around that piece that you're a husband, you got 2 kids, life's spinning as normal. You've got concerns about keeping them safe throughout this period. How have you been able to deal with the stress and have the resilience to be able to? I mean, on this podcast, I'm sure the listeners will agree, You've got that positive mindset already. I'm sure over the last few weeks, it hasn't always been as positive as that. But how are you dealing with it? And is there any tools and tips that you could, give to our listeners as to what you're actually doing to put yourself in that positive mindset and frame of mind?
Yeah, I think in the first instance, I'm just pretty lucky. And I suppose it's why, the likes of you and I and others, why we run businesses. This is the time that we need to step up. I think it was interesting. I was chatting to Kirsty Loveday yesterday, who was also a podcast guest. And she sort of reminded me really that as entrepreneurs, we are used to living in pretty sort of chaotic financial environment. We're used to making a lot of decisions very quickly. We're actually probably pretty good in a crisis because that's how we built our businesses, certainly very much in the early days. And actually more than that, you've got to think about all of the people around you who aren't used to this level of volatility, and your teams who aren't entrepreneurs and don't run their own businesses specifically because they want some certainty. They don't cope well in these very turbulent times, thinking about their family's welfare as well as their financial welfare. So in the main with me, it's felt a little bit overwhelming at times. Like I said before, when I looked at not being able to pay those 100 people, that really did, make me emotional, makes me emotional now. Just, that's the trigger that every time gets me going. And you think that's an overwhelming level of responsibility to have in your hands. But the rest of it, the business decisions, the speed that we were making decisions, the debts we were cancelling, the negotiations now with lawyers and solicitors and and everybody behind the scenes, that's kind of what I'm good at, I suppose. And it hasn't been overly challenging. I've probably quite enjoyed. I keep saying to people, I'm not bored. I'm absolutely buzzing. Now I would actually like probably to get a few days rest, because I feel like we've done everything we can and we just need to sit it out for a period of time. And I'm looking forward to getting in the garden. I'm fortunate because cash-wise, we can't spend any money at the moment because I've got no idea when my next paycheck's going to come through. We fall through all of the supports. Although my team are being paid, I'm not being. But I bought a little greenhouse. I bought some seeds. I bought some compost. So I've been getting the garden sorted. And then, my goodness, I'm grateful that I live near the beach, because quite often, won't be a surprise to hear that I'm not sleeping particularly well. So quite often, instead of laying there tossing and turning and thinking about what to do, I get down to the beach. There's nobody else about, and I go for a run, or I take my dog out and I go for a run. So yeah, some sort of physical exercise, probably the holistic mindfulness of getting out in the garden and doing some sort of planting. And it's all vegetables, it's all food sort of related stuff, which was, never been more motivated to be able to grow your own. And then just this recognition that, yeah, as an entrepreneur, this is my job, this is what I do, and there's nobody else you can look to. You've got to step up and deal with it when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of us as business owners are finding. Actually, this is our, as you put, this is our time. This is the time when actually we need to show up, and actually we're probably best to show up and deal with things, because if you talk about that typical change curve, we move from the shock and the anger and the blame and frustration and a period of depression quite quickly into accepting where we find ourselves and going into that problem solving, decision making, and commitment on what we're going to do kind of phase. And I think that's one of the skill sets that we have. And as you say, that's why we run a business. I think what we've got to remember, particularly with us with teams that are still in the business, is that they'll be going through that change curve at a different rate to us, and therefore communication's going to have to be vital and key to ensuring that they come with us on the journey. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of business owners are facing right now. But yeah, I think you're right. It's about trying to get some structure again as well, I assume, Mark, because structure gives us some kind of stability as well in terms of our day and what does our day consist of. And I assume that's a bit of a challenge at the moment for you.
Yeah, I mean, we're fairly lucky in hospitality in that we're generally open sort of 24/7 in the hotel, and we're open from 7 in the morning till midnight, 7 days a week. So we don't have the traditional structure that a lot of people would have in their businesses, a sort of Monday to Friday business. And that's been good in some ways, but bad in other days. I mean, I've certainly very rarely known what day of the week it is, in the last week. Obviously, with the kids not being at school, you don't have that level of continuity. We're trying to make sure that they get a bit of homeschooling sort of Monday to Friday, but also really just trying to go, look, you're going to remember this for the rest of your lives, probably, kids. And I do actually just want to chill out and hang out with them sometimes. And that's the biggest sort of frustration, I suppose, is what a unique opportunity this is to spend some really good quality time with my family. Yet the reality is, even when we get out, we're getting out once a day together and getting down the beach and walking the dog, but the phone goes, and I'm trying to sort of, strike this balance between taking calls which might be from very important people with some big decisions being made, but also going, we're in this for a period of time, just slow down. You're not going to solve this. The fascinating thing I've got at the moment, I suppose, is I've genuinely got no idea how we get out of this. I cannot see financially how we come through the other side. But the flip side is I've got no doubt that we will. I've got no doubt that we'll find a way, and that the businesses will still exist, and we will make it work. And thank goodness, I suppose, for that sort of level of confidence and optimism, which underpins everything, which frees up your headspace to go, I should just be holding my son's hands and chatting about the movie we watched last night. Incidentally, we watched a movie on the Second World War about tank commanders, and how's that for perspective? It was Fury with Brad Pitt. And you watch a movie like that and you realise, what those tank commanders went through. And then we Googled it afterwards and watched a little documentary on some of the tank commanders, and you see, how many people died. And I tell you, how lucky are we that our crisis of our generation is, sit at home and watch a movie, because that was gobsmacking.
I was going to ask you actually if there was anything, and you've answered the question then about, is there anything that's inspired you or motivated you through this process? But that would be that film for you right now, obviously.
Yeah, just gratitude. I think also I do keep banging on, because you become very sort of self-indulgent in these matters, and I think the press have focused a lot in the early stages of the impact on business. But the most important thing is obviously those sort of key workers, those frontline workers, and my goodness, how amazing it must be from a morale booster for them to see. I walk around our local streets and people have got posters in the window thanking the NHS. There's a pub on the cliff top near me that's put up a big flag thanking the NHS. So, we are very lucky. We are the privileged ones. We've got houses that we can stay at home in. We've got the internet. I've got kids, so I'm certainly not bored. And I think there's just this huge feeling of gratitude. So if ever it becomes overwhelming and you think, how do I get out of this? You just think, I'm not in the war, and I'm not a doctor or a nurse who's having to make life and death decisions by the second. And I should just cheer up, water my seeds, and keep smiling.
And do something with the kids. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so well put, Mark. So well put. And I think some of it is about doing the simple things, isn't it? It's one of the things that I've realised is, every day, I've got 2 daughters. I'm trying to do something with each of them. And then the simple things, because you can only do the simple things in life, but how much joy those can do. And maybe a month ago, clearly wasn't doing enough of those things. And it's just remarkable how your perception of the things that you thought were important to you seem somewhat laughable now, really. And you can get back and just do some of the simple things in life that bring you joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, gosh, what a treat! It's going to feel odd, isn't it, when we can just go for a walk? We live by the beach, and at the moment everybody's doing the right thing and trying to avoid each other on the promenade, and everybody's kind of like deliberately going out of their way to avoid each other, and you can't buy an ice cream and you can't buy a cup of coffee. And isn't it going to be, I wonder how long we will consciously observe when we're allowed to just sort of bustle up and down the zigzags and queue up for a coffee and share an ice cream with your kids, and those little things that you just didn't notice before. They were just so insignificant, have become very significant. And I hope we end up as better people, even if it's not for a long time, because we won't remember that forever. But even just for a period of time of transition, if we can remember those little things, then I think that's kind of good for humanity and the planet, really.
Oh, that'll be good. Life will be good then. So, Mark, thank you for giving us that update. Thank you for being so candid. Thank you for sharing some of your thoughts. Other business owners will be going through similar processes to you. And I think the fact that you've been so open and honest with us on this podcast will hopefully help them through the struggles that they may be going through. If somebody wants to find out more about you, Mark, and in particular right now, listen to some of your own podcasts, how can they find out more about you?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm generally at Mark Cribb on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm fairly easy to find, but the podcast is humansofhospitality.co.uk. And at the minute, I'm having these conversations regularly with other people in my sector. Almost every couple of days, I'm just having a quick chat. I think it's so important. There's been a lot of publicity in the last year around mental health, and we don't need to go through these things alone. And never has that been more obvious. That the one reassuring thing at the moment is we are all going through this at the same time. We're all going through it together. Many of our businesses are technically insolvent or failing, and it's not our fault. And I think the more we can have conversations and just chat about it, and the more people realise that, okay, fine, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people going through it, and that's why I'm confident we'll find a way. So yeah, I think having these kind of chats is really important, and I do that on a regular basis on my podcast as well. But thank you so much for the opportunity to come and chat on yours, Warren. It's really nice to be on the other side of the interview. So thanks for the opportunity.
That's a pleasure, Mark. Speak to you soon.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Some great insights and perspectives there from Mark, particularly about resilience and recognising and being able to be more aware of what really matters during a time like this, and how those lessons can take us all into better places in the future. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and please come back next week for more conversations of a similar nature with business leaders and entrepreneurs. I really think it's important to maintain contact and support with one another during this time, and one of the ways is to have honest conversations like this. For more support and valuable content, please visit our website, evolvemembers.com, where we've created a special COVID-19 resource centre which is open to everyone. And if you feel you've got a special insight you'd like to add to our website, whether it be in the form of an article, a thought piece or a video, please get in contact via the website. We'd love to hear from you. Inspire are also offering free webinars giving practical guidance on the financial support being provided by government. Go to inspire.uk.net to register your interest. That's it. Until next time, from myself and the entire Evolve team, please keep yourself and your family safe. Take care, and thank you for listening.
So there you have it. Big thank you to Warren Munson for allowing me to share that interview on this platform as well. I hope you enjoyed it. A little bit different, getting to hear from me rather than the people that I interview. So, but yeah, hope you got something useful from it. And back to normal from here on in, with another episode coming out in the next few days, chatting to our colleagues in hospitality. And if you'd like to send any feedback or sign up for the weekly newsletter that we send out, or if you'd like to send me some information, or if you'd like to be on the podcast yourself, any recommendations, please head over to humansofhospitality.co.uk. All the contact details on there, as is the link to Patreon where you can make a donation to keep this podcast on the air. Okay, thank you so much. Good luck, stay safe in the lockdown, and we'll catch up again very soon.